Hello and welcome. Memories of childhood. That's the chapter we are going to be discussing today in this explanation video. It's a set of two stories. One set in the USA, the second one set in Tamil Nadu in India. So we will be going through both the stories. Now, what is common to these two stories? If you read the note out here, it says that these are both autobiographical episodes. So please make a note of this particular word and use this in your answers. Okay, or these are both autobiographical anecdotes. Okay, so this word is important, from the lives of two women from marginalized communities. Marginalized means someone who has been discriminated against, जिनके against किसी तरह का discrimination हो रहा है कि उनको अलग रखा जा रहा है. I'm going to explain a bit in Hindi because some of these stories I realize are also a little complex. So if explaining in Hindi makes it a little easier, वो भी मैं थोड़ा थोड़ा बीच बीच में करता रहूंगा. Okay, who look back on their childhood. So उनके बचपन की कहानियां हैं. It is tales from their childhood and reflect on their relationship with the mainstream culture. The mainstream culture is what the majority people want, right? Is what the majority people want, and you realize that whether it was life in the USA or whether it is in Tamil Nadu, it's pretty much the same. The problems seem to be the same. The first account is by an American Indian woman born in the late 19th century. Okay, so the setting, etc., please remember this. And the second is by a contemporary Tamil Dalit writer. Contemporary means someone who writes in today's day and age. So the first one, Gertrude Simmons Bonin, born in 1876, was an extraordinarily talented and educated Native American woman. This is again a phrase that you would need to use in your answers, because the tale is about a Native American woman who struggled and triumphed in a time when severe prejudice means किसी के खिलाफ किसी तरह का discrimination होता था, that I don't like you, which means that I nurse a prejudice against you. Okay, prevailed towards Native American culture and women. Okay, as a writer, she adopted the pen name Zitkala-Sa. This was the pen name with which pen name means that when I don't use my real name, I use some other name. For instance, let me tell you that I used to write political satire at one point in time. Satire, social, political satire. So in order to make it look funny and also so that it's distanced from me, the writer of serious political stuff, I adopted the pen name of Tenali Rama, suggested to me by a professor friend of mine from Manipal. So she suggested the name Tenali Rama. So I used to write under the pen name of Tenali Rama, right? Similarly, Zitkala-Sa is the pen name of Gertrude Simmons Bonin. So this is again something which you would need to remember. And in 1900 began publishing articles criticizing the Carlisle Indian School. So she's talking about one particular school out there. As a writer, her works criticizes dogma, means a certain kind of thought which has the elements of prejudice and discrimination against someone, and her life as a Native American woman was dedicated to the evils of oppression. So basically talking about how उसके खिलाफ किसी ना किसी तरह का इस तरह का डिस्क्रिमिनेशन होता था, उसको सप्रेस किया जाता था. यानी कि इफ अगर आप कुछ सोच रहे हैं, आपकी बिलीव्स को ज्यादा बढ़ावा नहीं दिया जाएगा, उसकी आजादी नहीं होगी, that you think independently, that was not allowed in many parts in this particular school, in their Carlisle Indian School. So this is specifically about that. Okay. The second one is the Tamil Dalit woman from a Roman Catholic family. So that's her background. She has published three main works: an autobiography, Karukku, in 1992, a novel called Sangati in 94, and a collection of short stories, Kisumbu Karan. I have a feeling Kisumbu Karan, that's Kusumbu. Kusumbu means some kind of, how do I explain it? அவனுக்கு ரொம்ப குசும்பு இருக்கு. குசும்பு இருக்குன்னா someone who is a little mischievous, a little cunning. That's how it says. I don't know whether kisumbu and kusumbu are the same. The following excerpt has been taken from Karukku. Karukku means palmyrite leaves, which with their serrated edges on both sides are like double-edged swords. So this is the book from which this particular excerpt has been taken. Karukku, containing the word karu, embryo or seed, also means freshness and newness. And that is what the ending of the story, the second story, is all about. Let's go through the stories and then I would be able to explain to you. It has a lot of meaning. These stories have a lot of meaning. The cutting of my long hair. That's the name of the first story. The first day in the land of apples was a bitter cold one, for the snow still covered the ground and the trees were bare. The land of apples. Okay, so before I get into it, or probably you would want to read it in the notes itself, both the themes are cultural assimilation, where there is a sense of prejudice, there is a sense of discrimination, and about how the majority wants that you should follow the things practiced by the majority, and there is discrimination in case if you do not do that, right? So and in a very diverse land, whether it is India or whether it's America also, where the practices, the culture, the language, everything can be very diverse in terms of especially India. It can be quite a disturbing thought that you want, if the majority wants that आप वही करें जो कि majority चाहती है, right? So that becomes a big problem, which is why you see anti-Hindi agitations taking place in a state like Tamil Nadu. There is always an opposition that, if one person says that I want this to be done all through the country, there is opposition, because every state, every region within a state also has their own specific social and cultural traditions. Okay, so let me go through the word meaning so that it becomes easier. So the story is set, it says, in the land of apples. Now the land of apples is where her school is based. The land of apples in USA, Washington state. I'm not talking about Washington DC. That's on the east coast. There is a Washington state on the west coast of USA, which is known to be the largest producer of apples in America, and therefore Washington state is known as the land of apples. So it's quite likely, though this particular excerpt does not tell us so, it's quite possible that this particular story was set in Washington state, not city. Okay, so the land of apples, interestingly, let me also tell you, and I found this explanation very fascinating, that the land of apples, Adam and Eve story you know about, right? How the apple was used to tempt Adam and Eve, right? So the land of apples is also a metaphor for the boarding school, the Carlisle Indian school that she's believed to have written about, where this particular Native American girl was sent to assimilate into the larger culture, the culture of the whites, the majority, right? So the apples in that sense represent the forbidden fruit as per the biblical story, the forbidden fruit of knowledge, right? And the cutting of her hair, which happens, that is what you see in the title itself, the cutting of the hair of the narrator, it kind of symbolizes her loss of innocence and her native culture and her freedom, her independence to decide whether I want to have long hair or I need to conform to what the whites want me to be. Okay, so that way the land of apples becomes a symbol of the loss of innocence as far as this little girl is concerned, and she's forced to kind of merge, assimilate. उसको जबरदस्ती वहां पर व्हाइट कल्चर के साथ एसिमुलेट, मर्ज होने पर उसके लिए उस पर दबाव होता है कि उसको वही करना है जो कि वहां के व्हाइट मेजॉरिटी पीपल चाहते हैं कि वो करे, व्हाट दे वांट हर टू डू. There is also the reference to the snow, right? Still covered the ground and the trees were bare. The moment you think of जो पेड़ है उस पे कुछ पत्ते नहीं है, जमीन पर पूरी तरह से बर्फ छाई हुई है, it kind of conveys a very bleak kind of an atmosphere, right? It conveys a very negative, very dull, cold and bleak kind of an atmosphere. That is the kind of impression the writer is giving to you of the atmosphere prevalent at that particular place. A large bell, and then there is a lot of sound imagery in this particular story. A large bell rang for breakfast. So the ringing of the bell, which is very large and loud, its loud metallic voice crashing through. So the moment you hear words like crashing, it kind of conveys what? It conveys a sense of roughness. It conveys a sense of harshness through the belfry overhead and into the sensitive ears. Belfry is a dome-shaped structure. Okay, so the building obviously had that kind of a structure. Overhead and into our sensitive ears. So the ears are very sensitive, but the sound of the bell is very rough and very harsh. The annoying clatter of shoes, and then there is a sound made by the shoes which is very annoying, and clatter means, it's almost some kind of a rhythm. on bare floors gave us no peace. So there was absolute, lot of sound being created, lot of noise being created, and very rough noise. The constant clash of harsh noises with an undercurrent of many voices murmuring an unknown tongue. So there is this harsh noises, and then there is an undercurrent of many voices murmuring an unknown tongue, right? So the unknown tongue may be because it's not the kind of language which she is very familiar with. Made a bedlam within which I was securely tied. Bedlam again is referring to chaos, a state of disorder. So you see lots of different kind of noises from different tongues, some of them speaking an unknown kind of a language or lingo, which this narrator is not familiar with. All of that. So what she's only talking about, she's not able to make sense of what is happening around her. It is all noise. It is all noise around her. And I was securely tied. The word tied again conveys what? Lack of freedom. And though my spirit tore itself in struggling for its lost freedom, all was useless. So her spirit was torn, Her spirit is what? Spirit is the, वो क्या कहते हैं, जीने की चाहत. Okay, the spirit to live in a free manner, that was torn, and it was a struggle, right? But she found everything was of no use. A pale-faced woman with white hair came up after us. We were placed in a line of girls. We were placed in a line of girls who were marching into the dining room. These were Indian girls in stiff shoes. Let me just move it forward. These were Indian girls in stiff shoes and closely clinging dresses. The small girls wore sleeved aprons and shingled hair. Now, shingled is when you cut your hair very short, okay, and close to your head. That's called shingled hair, okay. As I walked noiselessly in my soft moccasins, this is a shoe without any heels and they are made of leather moccasins. I felt like sinking to the floor, for my blanket had been stripped from my shoulders. Okay, so obviously cold, but she was not wearing any blanket, so she was feeling as if she was sinking. I looked hard at the Indian girls who seemed not to care that they were even more immodestly dressed than I. They were wearing even lesser clothes than this particular narrator, but they didn't seem to care. Probably why? Because they had got used to that way of living, of being discriminated against. In their tightly fitting clothes, while we marched in, the boys entered at an opposite door. So I watched the three young braves who came in for our party. I spied them, means I looked at them very closely in the rear ranks, that is towards the back, looking as uncomfortable as I felt. So there were others also who were feeling equally uncomfortable. A small bell was tapped and each of the pupils drew a chair from under the table. So this was like a regimen where everyone was supposed to do something at the ringing of the bell. So you see almost military-like discipline being imposed out here, and she's obviously not very comfortable with that particular situation. Supposing this act meant they were to be seated, I pulled out mine and at once slipped into it from one side. So she sat on the chair, but she was not supposed to sit at that particular point in time. But when I turned my head, I saw that I was the only one seated and all the rest at our table remained standing. Just as I began to rise, looking shyly around to see. So there is that pressure on her because she is the only one who has sat. The others are all standing. So what do? You also stand, because there is the pressure to conform to what the majority is doing. बाकी सब क्या कर रहे हैं, वही करने का एक तरह से दबाव बनता है आप पर. So and that time a second bell was sounded. All were seated at last and I had to crawl back into my chair again. I heard a man's voice at one end of the hall and I looked around to see him, but all the others hung their heads over their plates. That means not even looking up. Again, when you look up, it conveys a sense of what? Confidence. It conveys a look of, that yes, I am listening to you. The others are almost very, they seem to be scared, too scared to even look up and see the face of the person, of the man who was talking. So there is an element of submission. There is an element of, that I am inferior to you. There is that element of, we will not look at you, we will not revolt in any way. In terms of the body language of the person, If you go on stage, for example, and if you're doing public speaking, if you stand like this, erect, with your shoulder erect and head straight, and you address the audience using your hands effectively, it conveys what? It conveys a sense of confidence. Whereas if you go on stage and you talk like this, your body language is like, this is how you go to the mic and stand there and say, respected principal, teachers, and my dear friends, and you're very tense. Who would you prefer? You would obviously prefer the first person, because the first student would have spoken with a lot of air of confidence and kind of communicated more effectively. Whereas if the person is just standing in one place and talking like that, it does not kind of convey the same level of confidence. That's the difference. I caught the eyes of a pale-faced woman upon me. Immediately, I dropped my eyes, wondering why I was so keenly watched by this strange woman. So the moment she saw someone staring at her, that seemed to unnerve her. उससे उसको थोड़ी सी घबराहट हो गई, तो immediately this thing. So you see the effect of just a stern gaze on you, right? That's what was happening out there. So the impression that is conveyed is very clear. It is not a very welcoming kind of an environment. It is a very intimidating kind of an atmosphere where you feel intimidated and scared by what is happening around you. The woman has not even spoken to her, but she feels intimidated just by the stern gaze of that woman. The man ceased his mutterings, and then a third bell, mutterings means whatever he was speaking, then a third bell was tapped. Every one picked up his knife and fork and began eating. I began crying instead, for by this time I was afraid to venture anything more. So she was kind of emotionally very distraught. D-I-S-T-R-A-U-G-H-T means emotionally very disturbed. But this eating by formula was not the hardest trial in that first day. It should be on that first day. Late in the morning, my friend Judewin gave me a terrible warning. Judewin knew a few words of English, and she had overheard the pale-faced woman talk about cutting her long, heavy hair. So these girls obviously are not comfortable in speaking English. But Judewin knew a few words, and she had gathered that the plan was to cut their long, heavy hair. Our mothers had taught us that only unskilled warriors who were captured had their hair shingled by the enemy. So this particular part of the paragraph is important because it shows that the hair was, in a sense, their identity. It was part of their persona, and for it to be cut off without their concurrence meant that they were almost being forced to do something which they were not approving of. Among our people, short hair was worn by mourners, that is, people who were mourning, and shingled hair by cowards. So only the people who were scared had shingled hair, and it would convey that they are scared, right? So it was like being forced to be something which they were not comfortable with. Okay, so it was almost like being labeled as a coward if they were forced to have shingled hair, and that's what they were resenting. We discussed our fate and some moments, and when Judewin said we have to submit because they are strong, I rebelled. So you see the difference in personality of the two friends. Judewin says we have to submit. Why? Because they are strong. But the narrator says, no, I will rebel. That it's not something which is acceptable to me, that against my wishes, मेरे लंबे बाल इस तरह से काटे जाएंगे, ये मेरे को मंजूर नहीं है. This is not acceptable to me, right? No, I will not submit. I will struggle first. I will not give in so easily. I answered. I watched my chance, and when no one noticed, I disappeared. I crept up the stairs as quietly as I could in my squeaking shoes. So she decided to vanish from the scene, that she should not be found by that pale-faced woman or by anyone else, and her hair cut. I crept up the stairs as quietly as I could in my squeaking shoes. My moccasins had been exchanged for shoes. Along the hall I passed without knowing whither means whether I was going. Turning aside to an open door, I found a large room with 3 white beds in it. The windows were covered with dark green curtains, which made the room very dim. Thankful that no one was there, I directed my steps towards the corner farthest from the door. On my hands and knees, I crawled under the bed and huddled myself in the dark corner. So you look at the kind of a place where she's hiding. A dark corner under the bed, right? As you see in this illustration. So you kind of get an idea that, you are almost obviously trying to hide yourself, but also a sense of, that you're so scared that you want to kind of push yourself into a corner. And that's precisely what has happened. She has been pushed to a corner because she realizes their intention of cutting her hair and labeling her as a coward, because that's what shingled hair people were meant to be. From my hiding place, I peered out, shuddering with fear, that is, shivering with fear, whenever I heard footsteps nearby. Though in the hall, loud voices were calling my name, and I knew that even Judwin was searching for me. I did not open my mouth to answer. Then the steps were quickened and the voices became excited. So she's now, see, the whole thing which I told you about, this sound imagery is very important in this particular story. First, the bells, which are like an intimidating kind of a noise. Now, as she's scared, hoping that they would not find her because she's hiding in a dark, dim corner under the bed, even then she's only hearing the noise, the sound of the steps, and they are again scary because she knows that if the steps come near her, it would mean that they would find her finally, right? So the sound is an important element as far as this particular story is concerned. So please make a note of it. Then the steps were quickened and the voices became excited. The voices exciting. So everything is an anti-narrator in the sense that each one of them holds a thread. The voices, the sound of the shoes, everything spells danger as far as the narrator is concerned, because she could get found out. The sounds became nearer and nearer. Women and girls entered the room. I held my breath and watched them open closet doors and peep inside large trunks. Someone threw up the curtains and the room was filled with sudden light. What caused them to stoop and look under the bed, I do not know. I remember being dragged out, though I resisted by kicking and scratching wildly. In spite of myself, I was carried downstairs and tied fast in a chair. So she is found out by those people and she's dragged out, even though she protests loudly, and she's tied to a chair downstairs. I cried aloud, shaking my head all the while until I felt the cold blades of the scissors against my neck. It's so chilling the way she has described it. The cold blades of the scissors against my neck, and heard them gnaw off one of my thick braids, yani ki choti. Then I lost my spirit. That is, she just kind of felt very defeated. Ki haar ho gayi meri. Since the day I was taken from my mother, I had suffered extreme indignities. Now, these indignities, of course, it's not explained in this particular excerpt, but possibly it could mean, physical and emotional abuse at the hands of those who were in charge over the past many years, right? It could be before she came to the school. So, indignity is like, when someone is disrespecting you, when someone is kind of hurting your sense of self-respect. उसको जब ठेस कोई पहुंचाता है तुम्हारी सेंस ऑफ सेल्फ रेस्पेक्ट को, it means that it is kind of hurting your sense of dignity. People had stared at me. लोग घूरते थे. I had been tossed about in the air like a wooden puppet. That is, not being treated as a human being, but like a wooden puppet without any life in it. But now my long hair was shingled like a coward's, and that kind of hurt her because she was a rebel. Unlike Judwin, who was willing to fall in line, this narrator was not willing to fall in line. So she did not accept the idea of being a coward. She was anything but a coward, right? So she felt, angry and upset that she had been almost labeled like a coward when she wasn't really so. In my anguish, I mourned for my mother. She missed her mother, but no one came to comfort me. Not a soul reasoned quietly with me. That there was nobody who kind of came and explained anything to her. as my own mother used to do, as to why something like this was done. For now, I was the only for now I was only one of many little animals driven by a herder. So she was part of a group, almost like a herd of sheep who are being taken from one place to another. And that's what there is no individuality as far as this girl was concerned, right? उसकी खुद की अपनी अहमियत नहीं थी, वो एक ग्रुप की एक पार्ट हो गई थी. It's almost like a roll number in the classroom without having any individuality as to who you are and what you represent and what you think. So she had just become part of a group, just a number in that herd, and they were like an animal, so being reduced to that, a coward and an animal. So mentally, she thought that, oh, now I am a coward. So, it starts affecting you at an extremely deep emotional level. I hope you have understood this particular story. Very strong and a very powerful kind of a story. Short story, but makes a lot of sense. The second one, as I said, is based in the state of Tamil Nadu, written by Bama. When I was studying in the 3rd class, I hadn't heard people speak, and this is about casteism. And caste is something I've in fact done documentaries on casteism in the time of elections in Tamil Nadu. And let me just give you a very brief background. For years in Tamil Nadu, the caste system is much more in the face. It's very, very stark. Log baat karte the, Brahmins used to discriminate against the other caste. But now what is happening in Tamil Nadu is that there are something called the MBCs, the most backward caste, which all got empowered in the 1990s Mandal Commission वगैरह आने के बाद. They are the ones who now discriminate against the Dalits, the SC, STs, and there are a lot of caste-based killings which actually take place. For instance, there is this community called the Tevar community in the southern part of Tamil Nadu. Just write out the spelling. I mean, this is for you to understand so that आपको समझने में और बेसिक कॉन्टेक्स्ट समझने में ज्यादा आसानी होगी. Okay, one is called the Tevar community. This is in the southern part of Tamil Nadu. Then in the western part of Tamil Nadu, there is this community called the Gounder community. Okay, a movie I hear recently, which is again on this. And then there is another community called the Vanniyar community, which is in the northern part of Tamil Nadu, right? These are the 3 main communities, और इनका हमेशा against Dalits, against the scheduled caste community, कुछ ना कुछ चलता रहता है, right? Because they don't like, for instance, अगर intercaste, suppose a Gounder girl marries a Dalit boy, there is always a lot of skirmish. The family kind of even gets him killed. There have things like that have happened in the western part of Tamil Nadu near Coimbatore. So those kind of things have happened. So when I was studying in the 3rd class, I hadn't yet heard people speak openly of untouchability. Like untouchability means that there is caste-based discrimination. Just say, for example, in Andhra Pradesh, in Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, there used to be something called the 2-glass system. इसका मतलब यह है कि अगर एक चाय की दुकान पर वो 2 ग्लास रखेंगे, तो अगर आप एक पर्टिकुलर जाति के हैं तो आप उस ग्लास से ही पी सकते हैं. उस ग्लास से दूसरी जाति वाला जो कि सपोजली हायर जाति का, उस ग्लास से चाय नहीं पिएगा. So there is this 2-tumbler system या 2-glass system that was very prevalent in Telangana. आजकल इतना नहीं होता है, लेकिन तमिलनाडु is one place where the caste system is still much more seen. But I had already seen, felt, experienced, and been humiliated by what it is, right? So she's saying that I didn't know about it, लेकिन मेरे को एक्सपीरियंस हुआ कि ये क्या हुआ, और एक पर्टिकुलर घटना के बारे में ये स्टोरी में बताया गया है. I was walking home from school one day, an old bag hanging from my shoulder. It was actually possible to walk the distance in 10 minutes. That is, from school to home, I could actually reach in 10 minutes. लेकिन मैं आधा घंटा लगाती थी क्योंकि मैं हर चीज को देखते हुए, नजारों को देखते हुए, एंजॉय करते हुए वापस आती थी. But usually it would take me 30 minutes at the very least to reach home. It would take me half an hour to an hour to dawdle along, means wander along, watching all the fun and games that were going on, all the entertaining novelties and oddities. Oddities means जो अटपटा जो था in the streets, the shops and the bazaar in the streets. The performing monkey, the snake which the snake charmer kept in its box and displayed from time to time, the cyclist who had not got off his bike for 3 days and who kept pedaling as hard as he could from break of day, the huge the rupee notes that were pinned onto his shirt to spur him on. Someone who is trying to make a living by being on a bike for 3 days continuously because he wants to earn money. The spinning wheels, the Mariatta temple, the huge bell hanging there, the Pongal offerings. Pongal is something, a dish which is made. Temples mein milta hai. Being cooked in front of the temple, the dried fish stall by the statue of Gandhi, the sweet stall, the stalls selling fried snacks, and all the other shops next to each other. So she's basically describing all that she would see, which would take her half an hour to reach home from school, a distance which should normally not take more than 10 minutes. The street lights always demonstrating how it could change from blue to violet. The Narikkur one, hunter gypsy with his wild lemur. Lemur is an animal in cages selling needles, clay beads, and instruments for cleaning out the ears. Oh, I could go on and on. Each thing would pull me to a standstill and not allow me to go any further. Standstill matlab main wahan pe ruk jati thi to see all those things, and that's how I took that much extra time. At times, people from various political parties would arrive, put up a stage, and harangue. Harangue means, go on and on and on. So you just keep talking, rave and rant as though, lecture karte rehte the through their mics. Then there might be a street play, Nukkad Natak, or a puppet show, or no magic, no miracle stunt performance. All these would happen from time to time, but almost certainly there would be some entertainment or other going on. तो ये सब कुछ उस शहर में होता रहता था, छोटे से शहर में. Even otherwise, there were the coffee clubs in the bazaar. The way each waiter cooled the coffee, lifting a tumbler high up and pouring its contents into a tumbler held in the other hand. आपने देखा है कभी किस तरह से कॉफी को कूल करते हैं, गरम गरम कॉफी को ऐसे ऐसे ऐसे, so they would do it so deftly कि जब ये लेफ्ट हैंड ऊपर जाता है और दूसरा टम्बलर नीचे है, ग्लास नीचे है, उधर से जो पोर करेंगे इन ऑर्डर टू कूल इट, वो सीधा यहां पे आएगा, बिकॉज उनका प्रैक्टिस इतना होता है. सो दे वुड डू इट लाइक दैट. ये छोटे छोटे कॉफी चाय शॉप्स में काफी देखने को मिलता है. और द वे सम पीपल सैट इन फ्रंट ऑफ द शॉप्स चॉपिंग अप अनियन मतलब प्याज काटना, देयर आईज टर्न्ड एल्सवेयर सो दैट दे वुड नॉट स्मार्ट, यानी कि वो ताकि वो प्याज को ना देखें, ताकि उनके आंखों में आंसू ना आए, सो दैट देयर आईज डोंट वाटर. और द आलमंड ट्री, बादाम ट्री, growing there, and its fruit which was occasionally blown down by the wind, the fruit coming down, falling down. All these sights taken together would tether my legs and stop me from going there. Tether means, tying up my legs and stop me from going home. And then according to the season, there would be the mango, cucumber, sugarcane, cucumber matlab kheera, sugarcane, sweet potato, palm shoots, gram, palm syrup and palm fruit, guavas and jackfruit. Jackfruit मालूम है ना कैसा होता है. Every day I would see people selling sweet and savory fried snacks, paisam, halwa, boiled tamarind seeds and iced lollies. So basically lot of description of what all she would see on her way back home from school. Gazing at all this one day, now she comes to the incident. अभी पूरा समा बांध दिया. Now she's talking about the incident. Gazing at all this one day, I came to my street, my bag slung over my shoulder. At the opposite corner though, a threshing floor had been set up and the landlord watched the proceedings seated on a piece of sacking spread over a stone ledge. So this landlord is obviously someone of supposedly an upper caste, a so-called upper caste. So वो बैठ के वो देख रहा है. Threshing is जब वो then the thing is happening so that you separate the grain from the rest of the crop. Our people were hard at work driving cattle in pairs round and round to tread out the grain from the straw. The animals were muzzled so that they wouldn't help themselves to the straw. Muzzle means उनका मुंह cover किया होता था, otherwise they would also start eating. So their mouths were covered so that they would also not start eating the straw. I stood for a while there watching the fun. Just then an elder of our street, that is someone who is from her own caste, an elder of the street, he's holding a bag like this, very thinly, so that he doesn't touch the contents of the bag which he's carrying, came along from the direction of the bazaar. So he's coming from the bazaar towards his home. The manner in which he was walking along made me want to double up, means wanted to kind of walk faster. Double up means walk faster so that she could catch up with him. The manner in which he was walking along made me want to double up. I wanted to shriek with laughter at the sight of such a big man carrying a small packet in that fashion, as though it's very hot or something which is very heavy and he's not able to this thing. So he's kind of holding it very lightly, okay, so that he doesn't kind of touch it and going along. And she finds it very amusing कि इतना बड़ा आदमी, उसका शरीर इतना बड़ा है लेकिन इतने छोटे को पैकेट को इतना डेलिकेटली पकड़ के आगे जा रहा है. I guess there was something like vadai, vadai, idli vada, vadai, or green banana bhaji मतलब पकोड़े, in the packet because the wrapping paper was stained with oil. So तेल से उसको पता चला कि इसमें कुछ ऐसा ही कुछ होगा, पकोड़े होंगे या वड़े होगा. He came along holding out the packet by its string without touching it. I stood there thinking to myself, if he holds it like that, won't the package come undone? मतलब वो खुल नहीं जाएगा packet and the vadai will fall down. The vada will fall down. I mean, we in Tamil call it vadai. In North India, etc., idli vada बोलते हैं. वो आई को कट कर देते हैं. Okay. The elder went straight up to the landlord, bowed low, and extended the packet towards him, cupping the hand that held the string with his other hand. The landlord opened the parcel and began to eat the vada. So, उसने vada उस landlord जमींदार को दिया और वो जमींदार उसको खाने लग गया. After I had watched all this, at last I went home. My elder brother was there. I told him the story in all its comic detail. I fell about with laughter at the memory of a man. So वो जाके अपने भाई को, बड़े भाई को ये कहानी बताती है कि ये ऐसी घटना हुई कि मेरे को काफी मजाकिया लगी. लेकिन अन्ना means elder brother was not amused. उसने उसको बताया कि he said the man was not being funny when he carried the package like that. He said everybody believed that they were upper caste. कि वो जमींदार को लगता था कि वो एक superior caste का है, जाति का है, and therefore he should not touch us. If they did, they would be polluted. That's why he had to carry the package by its string. कि अगर इस आदमी ने उस पैकेज को टच कर दिया होता तो जमींदार सोचता कि मैं इसको अभी नहीं खा सकता बिकॉज ये भ्रष्ट हो गया है. It has become polluted because of the touch of this so-called low caste person, and therefore I should not touch it. So that is the kind of untouchability and caste-based discrimination that is being highlighted in this particular story. When I heard this, I did not want to laugh anymore and I felt terribly sad because that's how she came to know that there is something called caste-based discrimination also. How could they believe that it was disgusting if one of us held that package in his hands, even though the vada had been wrapped first in a banana leaf and then parcel in paper? तो हम वड़ा को तो हम सीधा टच नहीं करेंगे बिकॉज पहले उसके अंदर एक केले का जो पत्ता होता है ग्रीन कलर का उसको लपेटा था, उसके ऊपर पेपर रैपिंग था. तो उसके बावजूद भी if you are not supposed to touch it, what kind of a discrimination is that? I felt so provoked and angry that I wanted to touch those wretched vadas myself straight away. कि मैं जाके टच करूंगी and let me see what happens. Why should we have to fetch? हम क्यों उनके लिए वो लेके आए? She wondered. Such an important elder of us goes meekly to shops to fetch snacks and hands them out reverently. Reverently मतलब with respect, bowing and shrinking. कि उसका body language is so much like almost as if scared. To this fellow who just sits there and stuffs them into his mouth. The thought of it made me very angry, infuriated me. How was it that these fellows thought so much of themselves? अपने बारे में क्या समझते हैं? Because they had scraped 4 coins together, just because they had more money, they had earned more money, did that mean that they should lose all human feelings? But we too are human beings. Our people should never run these petty errands for these fellows. कि हमको इस तरह के छोटे काम इन लोगों के लिए नहीं करने चाहिए. We should work in their fields. हमको उनके खेत में काम करना चाहिए, उसके लिए तनख्वाह लेनी चाहिए और उसको छोड़ दो. इस तरह के काम करके अपनी सेल्फ रेस्पेक्ट को दबा के काम इस तरह का नहीं करना चाहिए. My elder brother, who was studying at a university, had come home for the holidays. Now, her elder brother had come home for the holidays. He would often go to the library in our neighboring village in order to borrow books. He was on his way one day walking along the banks of the irrigation tank. Now this is very significant. Listen carefully. कि उसका भाई बाहर से आया है छुट्टियों के लिए, and then one of the landlord's men came behind him. He thought my Annan looked familiar कि ये पहचाना नहीं जा रहा, तो he asked him, who are you appa? What's your name? तो उसका अपना Annan उसका अपना नाम बताता है. Immediately the other man said, Tambi means younger brother. Generally Tambi can be said as a term of affection, जैसे भाई साहब बोलते हैं हिंदी में. Similarly, Tambi can be said to anyone who looks a little younger to you. in Tamil. On which street do you live? कि तुम कहाँ रहते हो, कौन से गली में रहते हो? Because होता क्या है, the point of this was that if he knew on which street we lived, he would know our caste also, because people of a particular caste lived in the same place, same street. तो अगर पता चल गया कि वो इस गली में रहता है तो पता चल जाएगा कि इसकी जाति क्या है, और वो जानने की चेष्टा कर रहा था, वो जानने की कोशिश कर रहा था. He was trying to find out which caste he belonged to. He was not particularly interested in knowing his name or his address, but by the street name, he would be able to figure out which caste this particular man belonged to. So that is how ingrained caste is in many parts of our country. Anand told me all these things and he added, because we are born into this community, हम क्योंकि इस जाति के हैं, we are never given any honor or dignity or respect. We are stripped of all that, कि हमको वो सब नहीं मिलता, basic respect. But if we study, लेकिन अगर हम अच्छी पढ़ाई करें और उन्नति करें and make progress, we can throw away these indignities. We can actually come out of this discrimination. So study with care. तो अच्छी पढ़ाई करो, learn all you can. If you're always ahead in your lessons, people will come to you of their own accord. वो अपने आप तुम्हारे पास आएंगे. That time they will not bother about your caste and attach themselves to you. Work hard and learn. So making the point that education is your passport to success in the future. If you are educated, your caste will not matter. Otherwise, the caste, in fact, this is a line which I had used in my documentary. Caste is cast in stone. C-A-S-T. C-A-S-T-E. C-A-S-T. Cast in stone means बिल्कुल पत्थर पे लकीर बनकर रह गया है, right? It is cast in stone. तो अगर उस स्टोन में उस लकीर को मिटाना है तो तुमको पढ़ाई करनी पड़ेगी. Education is going to be your passport to future success and also earning of dignity and self-respect. The words that Anand spoke to me that day made a very deep impression on me, and I studied hard with all my breath and being in a frenzy. Means, मेरे को और कुछ नहीं सूझता था. That was the only thing that worked for me. So frenzy. As Anand had urged, I stood first in my class, and because of that, many people became my friends. So when you are doing well academically, everyone wants to be your friends because they will stand to gain from you. At that time, the caste doesn't matter. So education that way has been a huge weapon for people in order to elevate themselves out of this horrible sense of being discriminated against only because you were born into a particular family. Right? So I hope आपको ये story पूरी तरह से समझ में आ गई. Please look at the notes. Please, more importantly, look at the question and answers that I have written, so that you will be able to handle anything that comes from the story. Very poignant, very moving, very powerfully told two short stories from different parts of the world. Tata, bye.